Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris Tuck and Beverley Ann.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast with myself, Chris Tuck, and...
Hello, it's Beverley Ann. Welcome.
And we've got a special guest with us today, Curtis Powell. I'm hoping I've said your name correct. Please correct me if I haven't, because, you know, with a South East London accent, it doesn't come out all that well all of the time. So welcome to today's podcast. Now, I come across you, Curtis, on TikTok of all places, because you talk openly about your work as a social care practitioner, an independent one, an advanced practitioner. What does that even mean in today's world?
Yes, so I remember when we're studying in university, they give us this chart that shows you the progression pathway of a social worker. So it's not just social work, they want us to grow in our experience. And so you have experience, advanced, and then I think consultant, professional, I can't remember what they are now, but advanced meaning I will, in my role, because I do independent work and I work for a local authority as well. And so as an advanced practitioner, I'm expected to know certain things, take a lot more initiative, handle potentially the most challenging cases, but also supervise other social workers, or in my team, family practitioners as well. And just, I guess their expectation is you know what you're doing most of the time, not all of the time, most of the time, because no matter how experienced we get, there's things that we don't know about, and we always have to consult, but it's an expectation. In terms of independent, I also do some independent work where I can fit it in through an agency, and that will be around, say, viability assessments or parenting assessments. But I'm very careful about how much of that I take on, because it will wipe us out, the amount of work. Yeah.
How long have you been in your job, Curtis? How long have you done this kind of work, and how did you get into it in the first place?
Right. So for years, I've been working with young people for about 22 years, 24 years, course quit 24 years, officially. Before that, unofficially, in youth clubs. Now, I've worked a lot in the youth justice service as a youth justice practitioner. And then, my wife was just pushing me, because it was difficult to get work. Mm-hmm. Then they wanted social workers. So about 4 years ago now, I qualified as a social worker. But I've worked in various challenging environments with young offenders, which is the majority of my working career. Court working, obviously home visits and assessments, the risk analysis and stuff like that. Working with young people who are incarcerated on remand or whatnot. Done a lot of work, and then I fell into social work, to be fair. So it was just for me a progression, because I'm always looking at my life as a ladder.
Yeah.
Having previously never done that, always just thought, oh, one day I'll just work it out. But actually, about 10 years ago, I thought, look, be progressive.
Yeah.
And that's not looking down on anything. Sorry?
Have a plan.
Have a plan. I didn't have a plan for a long time. And so very good at what I do, but just stagnant, and decided to get that degree. And that's not looking down on anybody who doesn't do it, because someone asked me the other day, would you encourage someone to be a social worker? Mm-hmm. And I bit my lip and I wasn't sure what to say. And we all laughed about it. So yeah, it's not for the faint.
No, it's a hard job. Can you tell us what a typical average day would look like? Because I just imagine it, every day's different, but there must be like typical jobs that you have to do in your work. What does it look like?
Good question.
We're good at this, Curtis.
Yeah, you are very good. So it depends what team you work in. I work in a child protection team. Previous to this, a few months ago, I worked in an assessment team in children's services. And then previous to that, I worked in child protection again. So a typical day would involve, let's say, for example, now this is what I do. I tend to organize myself. I do my visits all at once. If I want to survive, I do my visits in a day or two. Which means I miss all my emails for a day or two, and I'm instantly 100 emails behind by the time I get around to it. A typical day would be meeting a family I know and get on well with, or meeting someone new. A typical day would be, if I'm out on visits, I speak to no one but families. And if I'm working from home, I'll be literally, let's be real, let's be honest about it, convincing myself which task is the most important.
Yeah.
And then deciding on one, and then getting a phone call, and then that task takes priority, and then forgetting what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If it's all right to be that social work, it has to be.
Please do. Please be that on this.
Because we want to sort of like explore your workload as well, because, you know, Bev and I are both survivors of child abuse and neglect. Okay. So we have both had interventions with social care and social workers in the past. And the work that we do now, we know there are fabulous social workers out there, but we also know, obviously, in every sector of society, every profession, there's some not so good people. They don't do what we would consider the best job possible, whereas most do, but there are always some that don't, and there are always some that add to the problem. So I know from the work that I've done that many statutory services, whether it be the police, social care, health, wherever, that the workload is too high. Exhaustion is high. Attrition rates of people leaving their sector is high. Vicarious trauma is, you know, across the board. So self-care is what Bev and I advocate all of the time, whether you're a professional or just a survivor or both. So with all of that in mind, you letting us know what your work is actually like, and the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis would, I think, really open up some people's eyes and really make us appreciate what you're actually dealing with, because you do, as a sector, a statutory service, get a lot of flack. We know that. So what is your answer to all of that I've just put to you?
Right. You know, it's interesting. I did a podcast, and I think I'm going to redo it, seeing as you're triggering me to some of these thoughts, right? Look, you've got good and bad social work. I'm just trying to attack what's in my mind about what you asked. Good and bad workers in every sector. It just seems that bad nurses aren't called out, or they're not noticed as bad, but social workers definitely, because I think they hit a nerve. What happens is, with the workload as it is now, you're going to get good social workers doing badly. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to cut corners. It's the only way to do the job. So if I was to be honest about social work, I'm putting my neck on the block by saying this, but it, you know, has to be said. If I'm worried that someone's going to go and audit me. And so what I'm finding myself doing is doing what absolutely has to be done. But there are gaps. But then that is every sector of health and social care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, the other thing is, as well, is, let's be frank here as well. You're working at what we call the coal face. You know, you've got dynamics here where the family is breaking down or has broken down. There's abuse going on. There's lots of different things going on. And sometimes the social workers are expected to sort of literally come in with their super cape and find a way to solve it. And let's be honest, it's not always, there isn't always a solution that is a quick fix or a nice solution for everybody. You can only make the best choices at that time with the information you have. Yeah. So as Chris mentioned, you know, I was brought up in the care system. For me, I'm actually grateful for that. I say thank you because I am the woman I am today because of the good people in the children's homes, and that's not the norm for everybody. But the downside was I got sent back home again. So I was under a court order from the age of 4, went into my first children's home to the age of 10, and then one day got this message, oh, fantastic, you're going to be home with your family for Christmas. And that meant all 6 children going back to our mum and dad with no support. So for 3 years, I was the main carer. And then we went back into care, which for me was fantastic. So I came from a very toxic, dysfunctional family. And I'm laughing because sometimes, even now as an adult, I look back and I think, wow, whatever our social workers, because we had 2 different ones, because some were under the borough of Bromley, some were under the borough of Croydon. I feel for those social workers because of some of the decisions they had to make.
Yeah.
But with hindsight, there's also some other questions that I wish the social workers were able to ask us as children that didn't happen. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And it's good for people to understand that it's not a quick fix solution. And there isn't a happy outcome all the time for everybody, is there?
No, I guess there's something I addressed really early on when I started this podcast. One of those things was the social pressure to go down a certain predetermined road that you don't agree with, but all the other professionals do. And you've done the work with the family. And so they can be bending. And I've been subject to that a number of times, but I've bent twice. I haven't spoken about this yet, but I've bent twice to do something that I didn't think was right. That was to take a family to the court pre-proceedings, the court process, to take children. And I thought there's no need for that. But everybody around had a narrative. And I think that sometimes we are always subject to a dominant culture. And at times it will come out and that culture will say things that are not right. And perceive families in a certain way. And you will facilitate that as a social worker. You've got to be prepared to look like the outcast, like you look stupid, look like you don't know what you're talking about if you're going to really do justice to a situation. And I think probably most social workers will just bend, you know. And
because of the powerful dynamic around you, Curtis, is that what you're saying?
I've seen it and I've been a victim of it. And I remember the last time I did it, it was a case of people were questioning me in a strategy meeting. I knew what actually happened was I knew they were talking about me outside of it. Yeah, it was about 4 professionals, 5 professionals, 2 of whom were nothing to do with the case. And I found out that they were talking about me. And what happened was they made out that you just don't understand risk and harm. Actually, I do. Yeah. But I can see that there's some risks that can be managed and some that can't. But sometimes when people cross a threshold in their mind, of their constructs would say, look, we need to get these kids out of the family. And I'm like, let's remember, separation trauma is a killer, right? And so I was pressured to, and I was very conscious of that pressure to make a decision that everybody else had made. And we prepared to remove the child from the family when we really didn't need to.
Yeah.
But I think for me, listening to what you were saying on some of your TikTok videos when you were talking about this separation trauma, is that social care as a profession, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I think it is your education, your training that allows you to make the right decision by the child and young person and or the family if it's not abusive and neglectful. Because I would assume in those situations, if the parents are given the opportunity to make improvements and they don't follow through, then that child or children will be removed because they've had every chance. And at the end of the day, we are all about child protection. For me, Curtis, what happened in my situation, and I know I'm talking 30 years ago, but I still see it and hear it happening now, is that my dad was put into prison when I was 11, and I was living with my stepmom, who was very abusive. My mum was going through the family courts to get custody. She did get custody. But then the social workers who were involved in our case all the way through that time, they sort of like rubbed their hands together as if, you know, oh, right, okay, we dealt with that, clap, we can walk away, because they thought that they had placed us with my mum and my stepdad and everything was hunky-dory. But then another cycle of abuse happened and there was no connection with the social care, because they'd walked away, thought they'd done a good job. And then anything that we wanted to disclose as abuse, we didn't, because every time we'd spoken up in the previous 5 years, we weren't believed. So it almost silenced us, and we had no ongoing protection. So it's just a minefield, this whole social care. You know, and as I said, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And with your case levels at a high, and you're saying right at the beginning of this podcast that you literally make a decision to do something and then you start doing that and then something else happens and takes priority, things do get left, and children cases get dropped. How do you handle all of that morally?
I mean, everyone's different. I mean, we're talking about personalities, the trauma-informed way that we function in society, and we're looking at culture.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everyone is a social worker for their own reasons.
Yes.
So there are some people out there who are doing it because it's the next progression and that's it. And then there are some people out there that haven't got lived experience to understand what we call common sense, but the dynamic of making certain decisions in the best interest of the child. So I will always push to keep the family taking over. And what that does is that I have to put in extra work. Now, the reality of that, I podcast, it's funny, we're talking about everything I've spoken about, but the reality of that is that when you do the work, you're going to suffer somewhere. So I've made that decision already. I know I'm done. I know that there were some families when I worked in the assessment team, just to get them over the line, my timescales were messed up. So I failed in other areas, and It looked bad on me. When I'm in the office, the only thing that they care about is the numbers, right? And the timescales. But when I'm doing my job, they don't see that. It doesn't matter how well you write an assessment. They don't see that. But I've saved some families from going through the system because I've put in the work. Yeah. Now I'm a bad social worker to my colleagues, and now I'm failing other families.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not asking the government for anything because they have nothing to give. And I'm not criticizing them. Sorry, carry on, sorry.
No, what I was going to say is, you know, I completely hear you. And in 14 years, I had 13 social workers, and I can't remember all of their names, but some of those social workers were really good and they stood out. The others, they weren't bad, but they're not memorable. And that's the easy way to say that. They're not memorable. And listening to you, Curtis, and seeing your podcast, what I have gained from you is you come along with some lived experience, not necessarily of yourself, but you didn't leave school, go to university and become a social worker. And no disrespect to any young person doing that either. But when you've got experience in different areas, you bring that with you, which gives you a whole different dynamic. Yeah. But it's really interesting to hear what you're saying, because you're obviously very passionate about what you do. And so in one way, you're doing the role that you really want to do and you're following your passion. But from a colleague perspective, you're not ticking the boxes. You're not getting the scores in. Now, how would you like to see that change going forward if I had a magic wand?
You know, this is a good question. I don't think it's all about social workers. I think that there are people out there that do more important work. I think that the work is sorry, can you hear music in the background?
No,
it's okay. No.
My daughter doing her thing. I think the answer is we need to have 10 times as many youth workers and family practitioners. I don't think it's about social workers. What we as social workers really are on a lizard, it can lose its tail, like a crab can lose its claw when things go wrong. That's what a social worker is. We're that disposable limb. When things like Victoria Kalimbe happen, it's the social worker to divert all the energy away from the people who are really decision makers.
Yeah.
So I know what I am as a social worker. I'm a liability to myself and to government at some point. If we were looking at, so I know my limits. I'm going to tick legal boxes and meet the judge and represent. That's really my role. When it comes to doing the work, the true original social work, which fell short back in the day. It fell short for you all. It's come a long way, but it's still got gaps. But back in the day, social work was just visits and giving advice. The people who need to do practical work are the family practitioners and the youth workers. I had a conversation yesterday with a colleague, and she was talking about, and this is it, I've worked in this field for so long. She was talking about a 16-year-old who keeps going missing. He's always caught with a knife. He's on probation, and he's not stopping. And I said, you know what? I've worked with these young people so much. I know so many people who could help him, absolutely. Turn this boy around, but there's no funding.
Yeah.
The social worker is going to turn up to the meetings and talk about risk and harm, and everyone's going to represent. But it's like my wife says, because she works in a similar field. All those hours of meetings are nothing.
Yeah, absolutely with you. Yeah. And that's where, as we mentioned earlier, we've had Fatima Whitbread coming on, and she's launched Fatima's UK campaign, because what she wants to do, like you say, is open it up so there's more support, and it's not just on, one person. So children have, or young people have, a lot more opportunities to get support from other people, because it's not just one area though, is it? Because like you said, it's a youth worker, it's employment opportunities, it's sports opportunities, it's not just one area. It's making sure that there's lots of different opportunities, but we're also not fearful, because there's a lot of fear, isn't there, around, children in care, children that have been through the justice system. There's a lot of, what kind of person are they, and there's lots of judgment, whereas actually, let's start speaking to that young person. Let's get behind them. Let's see what's happening, and let's ask questions within the family, because you must have a success story, Curtis, or some good stories about what you do. Are you able to share anything? Obviously not names.
This is what this is the type of question you get asked in an interview, actually. So it's interesting. I could know.
We're offering you a job at the end of this.
Say again?
We're offering you a job at the end of this if you pass.
Right. Let me think. Success stories. I can give you two, and I don't know if they're success stories, but there is success there. So there was one young man I was working with. He was 17 at the time, in care. And it was interesting. The backstory is he's mixed race. His dad's black. His dad's not really been there, but he's in contact with his dad. He's not allowed around his mum because of an incident. So the police have bailed him away from the home, which creates massive problems, because they bailed for so long, and then they're out there in care, and they've not had anything resolved. Yeah. Anyway, so working with him, he has to go to court for possession of cannabis or something like that. It's clear that he's involved with olders. He has no self-esteem. He's the sweetest boy ever met. But he's the kind of child that will go to jail for murder because he was stabbed, right? I put in the work. This was in the youth justice service. I put in the work. The work was meeting him like 3-4 days a week. Now he lived about 25. I lived 25 miles from where he lived, so it's a lot of work to drive in and drive. Yeah. And it was doing some kind of reflective stroke therapy. I had to be a therapist. He had a girlfriend. Put it this way, he had never left his area. Never. I want you to understand, like, I live in South London. Let's say I lived in Streatham.
Yeah.
He had never, at 17, never left Streatham.
Yeah.
17. Now, the thought of, say, let's get on a train and go to central London would freak him out.
Yeah.
But what happened was, one day I called his girlfriend in and I said, like, well, let's all have a conversation. This is not in my job, really.
No.
You know? Let's have a conversation. I'm going to, what we call, when they fail to turn up to, if they fail to come to appointments, then we have to breach them, which means they go back to court, and then the court enhances the sentence. And I got him to cry. Got him to cry.
Sounds really mean, but it's not.
I got him to cry because I'm trying to get him, because he says, I don't like talking. I don't like talking about my father. But I know that's the only way forward for him. So he starts doing it, he starts to cry. His girlfriend's crying as well. And after that, he just came to all the appointments. Did he turn his life around? I left. And this is the problem with getting real close.
Yeah.
Is that one day he's got to stop and he doesn't know what to do, and he's gone to jail, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think young people going to jail in this country isn't the worst thing. I think that it's a good wake-up call for them, and there's interventions for them, but it means that they have to do it. So I'm not against that. For England, you know, it can have drawbacks, but for him, he needed that.
Yeah.
I think the other, and I say that as a success because he now has had an experience of, I need to talk. Hopefully,
yes.
But the other success story is this, and I'm going to throw a lot here. I'm not going to be too long on it, but working with a family.
Yes.
On paper, multiple child protection accounts over the year, about 3 or 4 or 5 children. If you listen to the way that other people break down a case, you will fail a family. I'm just giving you advice. You've got to just know that family for yourself and trust yourself. And although I read their account, I take them as they are.
Yes.
There'll be people around me saying, Curtis, this family, they've been like this. She's a bit of a disguised compliance. But what they're really telling me sometimes is they don't know how to tackle.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And so I'm like, okay, look, let me see how we get on with this. I'm getting on like a house on fire with this family. And I found out Mum was lying to me about all her success of how she's been getting on in the corporate meeting. And when I found out she was lying, I took her for a drive in my car and I said, look, I need you to be honest with me because the next step we're going to court. The neglect is serious. She broke down and cried. And her crying is important. I'm not trying to make people cry. I didn't know she would. But she started to cry and said, I hate my life.
Yeah.
And I said to her, so I'm not going to judge you. Let's take it one. And I gave her one task and she's been doing it for a long time now. And it's interesting. I just think we have to want to help.
Absolutely.
Is that what I'm trying to say?
What I think's really, what I'm hearing is, you know, obviously when my experience of being in care, being under court order was years ago as well. But one thing I will say, my mum had 6 children. So she went from 2 young ones living at home to suddenly having 6 children at the age of 10 and under with no support. Now, back then, I can tell you a different version. It was chaotic. You know, both parents were alcoholics. They were never there. However, as an adult looking back, I can see that what she really needed was support. She had all these children and had no idea. And as children, we were traumatized as well. So what's really great to hear is what you're looking at the family as an entirety. And, you know, I can think of 1 or 2 of the good social workers that I had, you know, they would connect, they would find out ways. One thing that's interesting is, do you have to tell people that you're turning up, or can you sometimes just turn up unannounced?
With the family I'm talking to you about, they've all been unannounced.
Yeah.
But that is agreed. That is like, we're laying this out. I will turn up to your house at any time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, no problem. They don't mind. That particular family, though, saying that everybody just walks through the door. So that's easy.
Okay, yeah.
But what it is that there's more to just being unannounced. The thing about being unannounced is that you have to be honest and subject to the situation.
Yes.
You're not in control as such. You will have to be subject to social services, work with us. And then that is a level of compliance and submission. It doesn't sound right, but it's important for them because there are issues that we need to address. And we would only, like, I've had a call recently for a family that I was covering, and my parents intoxicated. So I turn up.
Yeah.
But I turn up, and the way that my demeanor, my communication, it really does dispel a lot of the issues that they have with social workers. And how I had one recently who was just shouting at me on the phone. I'm outside your house. When I finally got in the house, you put in the work, what do you call it, motivational interview, and that motivational style, like, let them let off the steam, let them insult you. And at the end, she apologized. It happens all the time. They know when you're being a human being.
Absolutely.
You know? You're not treating them like a piece of paper. Yeah.
No, but what you're doing as well, like with any good trauma work anyway, is you're coming to the person's, where they are at that place. So you're allowing them that space to express themselves, even if it's not nice to hear. You're allowing it, and then it's like, okay, ready to hear you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got to just say thank you, for sharing all of this, because there's so much behind, smoke mirrors sort of thing, having conversations about social work, etc. For some people, it's challenging. So to be able to break down these barriers and have this conversation is fantastic, because it does help awareness. It doesn't necessarily mean things are going to change today or tomorrow, but it gives us an insight so we can start looking at what changes can be made.
Yes.
So if someone was to say to you about implementing changes, what changes would you like to see, Curtis?
Ooh, wow, good. Okay, so one of them is definitely, like I said earlier, we need to stop putting a focus on social workers and get the family practitioners out there.
Yeah.
Let them do the groundwork.
Yeah.
Let's not just throw tasks at families. There are some families that will never change with just a social worker in their life. We need regular work, and then it can be weaned off into a pathway. The other, I guess, is we've got to do something about the administration.
Yeah.
We have to. I'm looking at my computer and I'm like, surely there's a quicker way to do this. But I think when I look at the administration, I think it's built around mitigating any blame, making sure that we cover things because we don't want to get sued. I think that we need to find a more efficient way of saying we've done the work with family. I don't know what it looks like at this point, but that's something on my mind. Because it frees us up to do more groundwork and more meaningful.
Yeah. So, Chris, we lost you for a little while. So Curtis and I carried on. I've realised, but I kept quiet. So
yes, I don't know what's going on today. It's the gremlins are in the tech.
But we keep going. Was there any of those questions that you were thinking about that you'd like to ask Curtis, that you had written down at the beginning?
Yes, so let me just double check my list. I think you might have covered a lot of them. Just bear with me. So myths and realities around social care. I don't know if you've covered this when I was popping off. There are a lot of survivors that we are in touch with over social media, and especially those who have gone through trauma in their formative years, who have then had their children removed later on in their lives when they've become parents, and they all blame social care this, social care that. They often feel that removal of children happens far too easily and happens far too often. But when I speak to my social care worker friends, they say, but we don't remove children on a whim. The system's not set up to do that. So where is the disparity?
Yeah, that is the question.
Sorry, Curtis,
No.
I asked all difficult questions.
No, we need difficult questions. That is the question. We're dealing with a number of things here. Let's be honest about them. Some families were always going to fail. Some families were always going to neglect their children. And of those families, many of them believe they're doing just fine. Crazy, right? So some of those families, they're never going to understand why we do what we do, all right? Some families are then misunderstood. We've got people either in care, abused, not so trauma-informed about their lives, and are now social workers, easily triggered. We could have snowflakey type of social workers who are easily offended. I've worked with social workers who are afraid. I've read assessments of social workers who are, you can tell they're afraid of the family, and so they cast in unfair judgments, yeah? And so this is really going to get people's backs up. So you've got social workers making decisions that are based on, and if you've got a whole culture of that, you know, this is one of the reasons why social care does need to be more diverse, ethnicity-wise, because I'm a West Indian man, the way that I perceive risk isn't the same as a white man or a white woman would, you know what I mean? Or an Asian. We're all seeing it different. That's why we need to have conversations like this. So I think that there's a number of things, but I think as a whole, the system is very good. This is as good as it can get.
Yeah.
The problem is that, and this is one of the things that I've done, like I say, when I say to social workers, do the work with the family, meaning face your fear. You're stepping into a home, a lot of hostility, whatever, fear. You have to explain extensively why this is happening. Yeah. I've seen it done very badly. So I've worked with a family where the home was severely neglected. Mum's a drug addict. Don't know where dad is, 5 children, feces in the house, on the carpet. Yeah. The kids hate me. Wasn't my case. They're going to be removed in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
Mum kind of got it, but the kids didn't. The work needs to be done. You can't just pop children out. So I think one of the biggest issues with social care is that social workers are afraid to talk to the clients.
Yeah.
About why. Go deep, why.
Yeah.
You know, and tell them, go and fight for your kids afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, let's be honest, that's what happens a lot of the time anyway, with the fear factor. And, you know, Chris and I host workshops sometimes within social care. People are unable to have the conversations that need to be had. And when you say about the children, you know, that's their everyday reality. So when you say you're being taken now away from the mum that you know and love, if it's not explained to them and given them time, they don't understand. Because, you know, I remember how my upbringing, I thought mine was normal. I thought that what I'd experienced wasn't traumatic up until I was in my early 30s, because it was my normal. Isn't that what goes on in other people's lives? So you can understand, you know, children do need that time to be aware that there's, with support, that this is for your best interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll just say I've worked with families where children are going to be removed. And this is one of I picked up my phone today to record this. I've been stewing on this for a while, okay? You're going to have to prosecute a family, in effect, say, look, we're taking your children away, but also support them.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, which is, that sounds impossible. To get them to trust you in the process, you've got to still do the visits and encourage them and let them know, you know, at the end of this case, we're taking your child because you can't do it. Yeah. That is something I'm going to podcast on in a minute.
Yeah.
Good. I would listen to that one. What do you feel about the family court situation as well? Because obviously, oh God, it's probably another podcast by itself, to be honest, Curtis. But the family courts, when it comes to parental alienation, where we're seeing a lot of women from where we're sitting and the work that we deal with, where there's been sexual abuse and the child has either disclosed it or shown it, parent, whether it's usually mum, then tries to stick up for the rights of the child, and then they're told through the court process that they shouldn't be highlighting this, because if they do, their children will be removed and they will be put with the alleged perpetrator. And when I first heard that, I thought, that doesn't happen. But I know it's happened to at least 10 people that I personally know now in my circle. So it is a thing and it is happening. So the actual court system, the family courts, because they're closed, we're seeing that this abuse is happening all over again against the parent who is just trying to stick up for the rights of the child and protect the child. Have you come across that at all in your work?
Yeah. Well, this is it. It's an incredibly complex situation. It's like people are screaming in society, why are the conviction rates so low?
Yeah.
And well, how do you prove this is a type of crime? How do you prove this? She said yes, I said no. He touched my child told me, therefore my child's telling the truth. It's incredibly complex. The reason why its conviction rate is so low is because the nature of what we're talking about is difficult to prove. Yeah. And so what we're moving towards now, which is a problem, is guilty before innocent. Well, I can see us creeping slowly towards that. Now, when it comes to children, I've done Section 7 reports around parental alienation. And I found the mother was guilty of parental alienation because I dug deep into the story.
Yeah.
And a lot of gaps in, well, why is there so much trauma on the child, but the child has never experienced trauma? Mum's crying, both children are crying. They're like teenagers. Both children are crying their eyes out. You're wrong, you're wrong. And I'm like, what do you want to do? Daddy's like, I've never abused my children. Mummy's saying it has. I think that the court system, oh, this is a massive topic. So I think that
it is.
I think the court system is it's always going to be short-handed. It's always going to work on its back foot when dealing with this because, number one, we don't have enough lawyers. Number two, we take too long to deal with family cases. Number three, there are a lot of false stories out there. Parental alienation is so complex. The way that parents will turn one child against against their parent is massively sophisticated.
Yeah.
And it takes an independent social worker to take the time to dig in. The court's asking a lot of a social worker, make sense of this, please. I don't think it can do anything else. I just think it's not the court system. I just think that there's so much pain out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I had that in my own family though, Curtis, where like, you know, when dad was in prison and mum was sort of like saying, your dad's this, your dad's that. And it doesn't matter what your parents have done. They're still your parents when you're kids, because you don't have the wisdom or the insight or you just don't have that knowledge and expertise as a child and young person. So your dad's your dad, your mum's your mum, and you love both of them for different reasons, whatever. And so when mum used to say negative things about dad, it was like a knife in the heart, and vice versa. And as a child, you're literally stuck in the middle playing these adult games, and you don't know what's going on, but you find yourself treading a line that doesn't set you up for secure mental health and secure relationships. You know, it's really problematic, I think, on both sides. So I think when you're going through a divorce, you really do, if you love your kid, you should both be working towards not harmony and, you know, everything's happy, but working towards the best interests of the children.
Do you know what? Again, you know, I've worked with a number of families. I remember one particular family, the mum was accusing, the parents are separated, 2 children, mum was accusing dad of abuse of her and the children. Now, I have to put aside his abuse of her to an extent. But I found that there were behaviors of mum who was convincing everybody, every professional, that she was abused and the children were at risk. To find it was the opposite. I found that there are some parents who have been abused by someone, by the children's father, and are like, I will never stop you from seeing your dad, and I've never said a bad word against him.
Mm.
So I think we're dealing with characters. The court, how does the court deal with that? We're talking about parents who haven't gotten over the loss of that relationship. If you give someone 4 children, that's giving your life, and then they walk away.
Yeah.
You got to get that back. So, but I don't think it's good that parents, no matter, for the most part, you know, acrimony, I don't think we should be doing that to our children.
No.
You know, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we could carry on and talk about this, and I'm very aware of the time, and I am the timekeeper, I'm afraid, folks. So to wrap this up, there's a very quick question I want to ask you, Curtis, and it's something that we talk about all the time, and that's self-care. So what do you do for your own self-care? Because, you know, you're dealing in environments that are very, very challenging, but to enable you to have continue in that area where it's your passion as well, how do you look after yourself? What's important to you?
I just want to say this. I appreciate the question, but you know I'm going to be honest. All right? As a social worker, you're going to burn out once or twice or times. And what does that look like? Everyone is different. For me, various symptoms in my body, my mind. I feel pressure in my head. And then when I stop and feel that, it feels actually it's a bit of anxiety because I'm going to fail, blah, blah, blah. So I know and I've accepted, which is very helpful. Self-care is accepting, actually, I will fall at some point. I don't think that we can consistently work in child protection and not fall or fail or burn out. I just think it's how we manage and how early we respond.
Yes.
So that's one tip. The other thing is, me personally, I always see that there's going to be a light over the horizon. There's a set of tasks that are draining all my time. I'm going to not be able to look after myself for the next 2 weeks. I've got to get this done. That's my reality. But I know when it happens, once I've got that out of the way, I will stop. I will have some relief. And so that's helpful. The other thing I want to say is, luckily for social workers, we control our own schedule. You are, again, we know, professionally responsible for yourself. You owe it to yourself and the profession. Do something. Don't just go to work and go home. You've got to do something. I have 3 children. Luckily, one of them's in uni, so it's really 2.5 in terms of responsibility. I'm still involved in the school run for my youngest is 10, and I'm busy on top of my job, right? So I always say to people, you know, there's something you're going to have to let go of.
Yes.
And this, you have to spend less time with your children just to get yourself together. They will get it and they will be fine because they're loved. The other thing is, lastly, I look at my schedule and I say, right, I'm logging off 4 hours early today. That's it. I'm going to the gym, going for a walk, I'm logging off. That's a lifesaver.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for your honesty there, Curtis, because this is something people don't want to talk about, you know, especially within the profession. So thank you, because it's something that we're very aware of. We get a lot of support still doing what we're doing. We can't not. So thank you.
I just want to say one more thing. hearing more about both your past, which is interesting. You're both coming from a similar space of this care system and all the stuff that you've been through. I've got a good eye, and I would never have guessed that you've been through that, which is a testament to the work that you're doing for yourselves.
Thank you. It's a lot of hard work, and I'm very proud to say that 8 years ago, I visited a Category D prison for young offenders. They were young males, and it was about business class. And one of the lads, he had some gumption. He kept asking questions, and he was very much like, what do I want to listen to you for? And I said, you don't have to. And he said, and it's all right for you. You've been born with a silver spoon in your mouth. And I said to him, thank you very much for that. I'm going to tell you at the end why I appreciate that the most. Yeah. And what was fantastic was he was asking the questions that all the others wanted to ask. And it didn't matter about his attitude. He wasn't being rude. He was just saying it as it was. And then at the end, when I responded and I said, thank you for that compliment, because when I was 16, I lived in a hostel on my own. The outcome for me was really low. So when I'm talking to you about the biggest tool you have to have is trust yourself, and then others will trust you. It's about looking at yourself. I'm not just saying it, I've done it myself. And we constantly do work on ourselves. I'm a big believer. So thank you, Curtis, because that is something, you know, for too long, I had kid from care written on my forehead. And then once they found out that I was a kid from care, it was like, the judgment. So I'm proud of who I am and where I've come from, but I'm also proud that it doesn't necessarily have a label on me, hasn't defined me.
Yeah, I appreciate it being on here and hearing your stories. Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on to be really. I'm looking forward to the next one.
We'll have you on again. So much to talk about.
And Curtis, thank you. So would you like to share your podcast? Because we will add the link anyway at the end, but just so that people can hear and they can come and listen to you as well.
Sure. So on all platforms, all podcast platforms, on almost all social media platforms, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, anything, I don't even know, the social work race. It is set up for primarily social work students and newly qualified social workers, but it's for all of us. And we talk about social work as we have done today. So I appreciate that time today.
Fantastic.
I just wanted to let you know, Curtis, as well, that Beverley and we did a training this year, a couple of months ago, Bev, for Social Work Week for Kingston. I don't know, Kingston and something.
Kingston.
Area. And that was a real eye-opener. We just said to the social care workers, just ask us anything, you know, we're open and honest, and we used our lived experiences to raise awareness and to change practice. So that's what we do.
Yeah, appreciate that. Let's work. We can do this together. Yeah.
Absolutely. It takes a village to raise a child, and we should do that within our community. It isn't just one person. Absolutely, to raise and protect, and our children are our future. So on that note, we're going to say thank you very much. We're going to say goodbye, and if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to contact breakingthecycletostepforward@gmail.com or make comments under whatever platform you've seen this on. And if you've got any questions you want Curtis to answer, please send them in, and we will be getting Curtis back at another time, even though he's particularly busy. But thank you very much for listening, everybody, or watching if you're watching on YouTube, and look forward to speaking to you another day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.